Welcome to Alabama Gristmill. This is Mike Causey with my co-host, Donna Causey.
Hi.
How you doing out there on this nasty day, rainy day?
I know it. It's a rainy day in a lot of places today. One of those stormy times, you know.
We got a good story coming up. This is going to actually not take us to the pioneer days, but more in the early 1900s. And it's how the famous Bonnie and Clyde duo were involved or potentially involved in the state of Alabama and with some criminal activity. And then in addendum to that is a true blonde bandit out of the city of Montgomery and her escapades and how it might have inspired Bonnie and Clyde.
She was called the Blonde Bandit.
Yep. And well, before we get into the story, we want to kind of bring you up to speed on a new thing we've got offered. We always often have a lot of people asking how they can help out Alabama Pioneers and this podcast. And so we've set up a thing called as Patreon, where you can be a patron of the Alabama Pioneers website and podcast. Very simple to do. You can just go to the website, click on the Be a Patron button, and then you can pledge whatever you want, anywhere from $1 on up. So anything's appreciated. And with all the new resources, or not a lot of the new things we're doing, it takes a lot more resources and everything, and this will allow us to basically get some better stories out there, more deeper, and more things out there to you that are pertaining to the state of Alabama and the history.
Yeah, and I'm trying to add more to help the genealogist or family researcher, but not overwhelm the site with that. So this is a way that you can get more information.
Basically, we just wanted to provide a place where you can actually donate and help pledge to help us with the expenses of the site. So make it real simple and possible. So you can just go to the website, like we said, and go to alabamapioneers.com, click the Be a Patron button, and you'll be good to go. Anything's appreciated. And
we got some rewards along the process. Once you get into the site, you'll see what the rewards are, and we'll do more and more from time to time, because we really appreciate everybody listening to us and supporting us. It's just a way that we can handle it better, because that's just when you have people wanting to contribute financially or any way to help us, it's kind of hard setting up something for the people to do that. This is a way we can do it without being encumbersome towards us as well.
Yeah. And also, one thing, when you become a patron, you can actually become a member of the Alabama Pioneers community. And we wanted to create that. So as we get a lot of queries throughout, pretty much daily basis, and there mainly a lot of pertains to genealogy and genealogical questions. And we wanted to kind of give a place where you could actually have those queries posted and ask questions of other members.
Yeah, they're very specific, and it generally regards, specific families. And I wish I could go back and help each individual person, but it's just not enough time.
And now,
I think we could help each other through this new means. That's what the point of this is. I think if you can put your query down, if somebody else is interested, might have the answer where you can't get it from me. And we found missing people before on it. It's hard to do it on the website, though. So the patron program will kind of be a way to do it where you can converse with others and handle it better. It's kind of just an aside to it. Click the patron button and you can just see all the explanation. It's kind of detailed, so I don't want to go into it all here. But it will be an option for people that are really interested in family research, maybe not genealogists specifically, but just want to know about your family.
And another thing we're setting up, if you become a patron, is you'll be subscribed to the new exclusive Alabama Pioneers members newsletter, and we'll have material and other information that you don't see on the website, a little bit more in depth, and we'll also include different queries and information, and so we can kind of crowdsource information or share information within the group.
And queries that you will be able to see. So it'll also be, and those people who really love recipes and things like that, we can add more over there. There's so much more we can add to it, which this new newsletter will give us the option to add. So it's a little extra bonus for being a patron.
And rest assured, with all this and the new additions and the additional information in the community, we're still going to keep everything that's currently out there free and accessible. So we're not going to be changing any of that. So you can still access everything like you always can. And it's just everything now now is just helping us out and becoming a member and a newsletter as well. If you like what you're doing here and want to help us out, easy to do. Be a patron.
Cost of a cup of coffee a month, can give us a big start, because we do have a big following, and just a little bit from every one of us can help this site grow even more than it is now. We have a lot of grand ideas we want to do, but
the bottom line is we really appreciate everything and the growth and the excitement we have around the website and the podcast, and it continues to grow and get bigger. So as always, we appreciate the listeners and the readers on the website. Well, now we'll go ahead and jump on into the story and tell us a little bit about first how Bonnie and Clyde had a connection to the state of Alabama.
Okay, yeah, I was kind of doing some research on another subject and ran across it. It was real interesting. I'm wondering, Ashley, if Bonnie and Clyde kind of got their idea from this couple. Like a similarity between the characters and all. In fact, a movie was made out of the Blonde Bandit. In fact, called the Blonde Bandit.
Well, why don't we give everybody a little quick primer on Bonnie and Clyde? The people aren't familiar with her.
Back in the Depression era and all, the people were having all kind of things, trying to make ends meet. It also brought some criminal mentality into play. And Bonnie and Clyde, if you go back to the movie Chicago, that's kind of the era we're talking about, when things were kind of, in fact, Chicago was probably based a good bit on the Bonnie and Clyde characters, because they were kind of romantic type robbers that rob banks. And they made a movie about them, and if you haven't seen it, I'm sure you can find it. Clyde was a robber anyway. He had already gone into a life of crime and had been in jail, but he fell in love with Bonnie one day in 1930. He just happened to go into town instead, and I guess she had leanings that way. She liked an exciting person like he was, and they wound up connecting. Anyway, they met each other, and they were arrested. Clyde was arrested for burglary and jailed again, and then he got out in 1932, rejoined Bonnie, and they both resumed a life of crime. The story of Bonnie and Clyde was kind of a romantic story in the news, because people were doing without, and here they were robbing banks, and people had mixed feelings about them, I guess, and some because they thought the banks were taking everything away from them. The banks were not held in high regard at that time.
So how does all that tie into Alabama?
Well, there's a rumor that Clyde Barrow's father and his paternal grandparents were actually born in Alabama, and it's not been proven. And his sister-in-law, Blanche Barrow, who kind of joined them. She was married to Clyde's brother named Buck, and she joined them from time to time and went around and robbed banks as well. But there's a rumor going, too, that because they had a father and grandparents in Alabama, they were not going to rob banks in Alabama. And they would just use it as a safety place, I guess. But anyway, Blanche Barrow wrote a memoir and included some information about it. She often talked about vacationing on the Gulf Coast of Alabama. In fact, there's some pictures of her lying on a beach in Mobile from 1931 in that book. But I don't know if they really decided not to change their mind about robbing a bank in Alabama, but there's a story that Steve Mays, a person that was living during the time, wrote that, and he said that they did rob a bank and they were seen in Arab, Alabama, and he saw them. So
when was this?
Back in 1934, in the spring of 1934. It was told that the bank got robbed in Tarrant, and the FBI chased them down Highway 231 toward Aniana, and somehow they were in Arab for a while, hiding out behind a post office. So it was just kind of a dramatic story about it. In fact, Steve Mays had a picture of the old post office where they hung out. So if you can find the article about
which post office?
It's Brookville Post Office. It's a small, tiny little building. You can see the picture of it on the site. It's on. You can see it on the web. Not on my website, on his website.
Yeah, we'll have that link in the podcast notes, and we'll have that picture up as well.
Yeah, there were a lot of people that could tell the stories about it, and the man, he had a very credible story. So it is believed that they came through the state of Alabama and went through Arab. It's a really interesting, detailed website that they have where he told the story.
Now, what post office was that at?
It was in the Brooksville post office. It's a little tiny building. It's a picture of it on their website, the one that you're going to link to. Yeah, you can see it, and you can see all the details of the story. It talks a lot about the different people in town and what the car looked like on the inside. So I'd look it up if you want to and go into more, all the detail information. So it makes it really credible.
So now you also say we've got our own Bonnie in Alabama?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, she was not from Alabama, but she did, she wound up getting captured in Montgomery. So that's what the exciting part of this story is. That's how I found it. It was in a little newspaper article about it, and I believe it was in a Auburn paper and a New York paper. She was called the Blonde Bandit, and she was captured in 1930. So this predates Bonnie and Clyde, and that's why I'm kind of wondering if possibly, Bonnie and Clyde got the idea of being kind of like them. She and her boyfriend.
Where was she from?
She was from New York, Auburn, New York. Actually, she was from Ontario originally. Her name was Amelia Randeronic. That's kind of a funny name. So I guess she just changed her name. She changed it to many things. But she was jailed with the name Sally Joyce Richards. Her other name she used was Montgomery Mabel, or Mabel Powler.
I like that. It definitely sounds like a criminal name.
It does, doesn't it?
Montgomery Mabel.
Montgomery Mabel. I don't know where the Montgomery came from. It came from being captured there, but there's Montgomery, New York, too, so I'm sure something like that. But she was from Ontario and came to America in 1928, and really young age. They say around 13. They don't know for sure because nobody could ever get her age straight. It went. People said it was different ages at different times. So when her mother tried to help get her off, she said she was not of age to even be in jail. So it was interesting. So we really don't know her age. But she was young. And she fell in love, or she met and fell in love with a boy named Peter. Now, I'm going to really mess this name up. Dom Kiewicz, I believe is it. Dom Kiewicz. He was 21. We'll call him Peter, so it's a lot easier to say because that's what she called him, or Petey is what she called him. And he was around 21, and he had a friend named Stanley, who was dubbed the Millionaire Kid. And all three of them got together, and they decided, it's the 20s again, and 1929, so it was after the Depression, so they were kind of without, and they decided to become robbers. And their first robbery occurred in November 6, 1929, so they got started real early. What they did, she and her boyfriend, Petey, went to a jewelry store, and they started talking to the jeweler about being engaged, how you do, and then they started wanting to see some engagement rings, and then they started wanting to see some wedding rings, and while the jeweler was kind of getting real intent and excited about possibly selling some rings here, he looked down and started getting the rings out that they were interested in, and then he looked up, and in his face was 2 revolvers, and they immediately, he got the tray out and gave them whatever they want. They got away with about $20,000 worth of jewelry. I guess they were pretty excited because they continued their spree. But they did it a little bit later because they said there was their car had been abandoned somewhere, and they found some blood in it, so maybe somebody got shot because they were shot at while they were leaving. They evidently didn't put them down because they started again.
So they did escape, huh?
Yeah, they did escape that first one, and they felt pretty lucky, I guess. So on December 28th, they robbed a butcher shop, and then that was a big day of spree because they went and robbed some more gas stations and a meat market. But the meat market, I guess it got kind of violent, and they wound up killing a man there. So that's when things really were getting kind of serious, I imagine, when they
ramped it up.
Yeah, I guess I don't know the details of why he was killed, but there was a man killed. They say his face was shot off, so it must have been pretty brutal. But then, so they continued again, January 20th, in 1930 now. They robbed a boot shop and a furnishing store, but they didn't get away very much then. They only had just a little money. I guess she wanted, and then some boots. I guess she wanted some boots or something, or dress shoes. Yeah, gotta look good while you're robbing. They hit the jackpot when they came up on January 27th, though, and they robbed Stein Jewelers on Broadway in Buffalo, New York. And they really made off with a lot of cash then and money and jewels. Then they escaped in a stolen auto. And that's when the Alabama comes up, because they headed south trying to get away from them. And the car was abandoned eventually, but they did get caught in Montgomery, Alabama on February the 9th, 1930, because that was such a huge robbery. You can imagine during the Depression, that much money and that many jewels. I think it wound up being about $20,000 or more. That's a lot of money then. And Milton McDuff was the one who caught him. He was the superintendent of the Birmingham Bureau of Identification, and they were taken back to New York. That was, as a little fact, that was the longest road chase the Buffalo Police Department ever staged. I can imagine it was.
So you're telling me the Buffalo Police chased them all the way down to Alabama?
To Montgomery, Alabama.
In the 1930s?
1930s. You imagine, in the car, this is 1930, not 1930s. It was the beginning of 1930. You can imagine the cars they were driving and the roads they were driving on. And
that was a big-time chase.
Well, they were determined to get him, I guess, because, they were getting kind of violent at that point. And so they had to catch them.
It was a signature robbery in the city, so they're going to chase them.
Can't you imagine the trip along the way, them chasing them, following them in their path, and checking with people along the way? I bet there was a lot of excitement in the country at that time as that chase was going on.
Absolutely. It's going to take a couple of days to make it down from Buffalo to Alabama.
But they say that after they got arrested in Montgomery, this kind of give you the character of the Blonde Bandit.
Or the preferred Montgomery Mabel.
Montgomery Mabel, yeah. Anyway, what she said, it was supposedly, she said, just say anything you want, but before anyone else comes to talk to me, I wish they'd give me back my lipstick. So she was, there go the boots, you're talking about, she had to be, dressed to fit her situation. She wanted to always look right. But anyway, after she and her boyfriend were sentenced, the authorities got him back, and he confessed to Petey confessed to the story that he'd stolen the jewelry. They found it in the automobile, that they were driving. They were all driven back from Montgomery to Birmingham.
So did they figure out what they got?
Yeah, they found 8 diamond rings worth $1,000 wrapped in a handkerchief, and they had stuffed them in the upholstery of the car. So trying to hide them, I guess they didn't do a very good job. Back then, the cars were made a little different than today, too. I bet you it was easy to discover.
Probably not too much upholstery in those cars in that time.
Not too much upholstery in it, I imagine. Because, they were kind of a little bit more open than they are today. So I imagine it was kind of difficult to hide them.
So they took them back up to New York at that point?
Yeah, they took them back and took them to trial. And Petey must have cared for her, because he defended her, and he said he forced her to become a part of it, so trying to get her off. But it didn't really work too well. It was a dramatic thing that took place during the trial, though, that was kind of interesting. He was sitting there out in the court, I guess the lobby, but for some reason, the jeweler, David Glickstein, was sitting there kind of not too far away from him, I don't think they do something like that today. And I don't know how protected he was, because Petey all of a sudden jumped up while she was in the room testifying, and he jumped up and he lunged at the jeweler and slashed him in the neck and yelled, "That's how I treat squealers," So anyway,
it was a rough time back then.
Yeah, it kind of gives you in the 1930s, police situation. It was a little different than it is today. I don't think something like that would be going on today.
I guess she was found guilty.
Yeah, she was found guilty. She was sentenced to 20 years life in prison. Something else interesting happened after she was found guilty. She asked the judge, while she was in the courtroom, could she somehow marry Petey. She said, I love him, and I had 2 children with him, and I lost a third. And isn't there some way we could get married? After all this, it's kind of crazy.
What did the judge say? There's no way.
He didn't. He said no, that she couldn't get married to. It's kind of stupid, Petey received life, of course, because he'd killed, another man, and probably more than one. And the other guy that was with him kind of received 15 years to life. So he didn't get quite as bad as Petey did, because Petey was a murderer, basically. He was pretty vicious. But evidently, little old Sally didn't, or Montgomery Mabel, or whoever she was, she didn't like jail too much, and she tried to escape. She talked a girl into, another prisoner into trying to escape. She got as far as the prison yard, but didn't really get very far. She didn't stay in jail, or that was just about a couple of months after she went into the jail. But the whole case got into a being-braided movie. You can still probably find it somewhere. It's called The Blonde Bandit. But anyway, it's an interesting story. You go to the movie Chicago and you see how they talk after they've been jailed, you know. It just kind of fits her same pattern. And I'm just wondering if that movie and the play and all are based on a lot of that story about the Blonde Bandit. Anyway, it said that they were interviewed after they'd been captured, and the girls just were chatting happily, you know, like it was it wasn't such a big deal. And the prison matron talked to them, you know, like they were famous, and they posed for pictures and snapshots by the photographers. You can imagine two escaped prisoners being treated like that today. But that's
kind of like the Mae West of the time.
Yeah, like the Mae West, and kind of like they did in that movie in the play Chicago too. So, you know, I remember that scene in there. When I read the story, it just seemed so much that play came alive, and so it was really interesting. It's just interesting that Montgomery got caught in the midst of it all.
So what happened? Did she end up staying in jail?
Oh yeah, she stayed in jail until December 1938. She served 10 years. Then the governor let her go, but the story just kind of faded after that. We don't know what happened to her because there's no more information. Petey was paroled, and but there was some news about him around age 55. He evidently got caught up in robbing a drugstore, so I guess crime was a part of his whole life, and he died in 1976. But that's the story of the Blonde Bandit in Montgomery, Alabama.
How it ties into Montgomery, Alabama, and Bonnie and Clyde. And all. So it's a little known story that people probably don't know about, and I can just imagine what it was like in Montgomery, Alabama in 1930 when they were captured, you know, with all this going on right in town. Because Montgomery was still a kind of what a great fun story
town.
Of that the era in the early 1900s. Crazy personalities, adventuresome, even though they're criminals.
Oh yeah, they're criminals. It's kind of I think so many people were destitute, and they hated the bank so much that they had mixed feelings about that. They didn't condone crime, but at the same time they wanted them to get even,
Almost a Robin Hood element to it.
Yeah. Except I don't think they gave their money away. I think that to the poor they kept it.
They kept their money.
Bad thing of them, but I guess they were there to make themselves rich. But it's interesting. They didn't wind up like Bonnie and Clyde. I guess they didn't go to the very end and get killed and everything, but they wound up being captured in Montgomery before they did.
Due to the excellent police work and the due diligence of Milton McDuff.
That's right. Milton McDuff got famous for that because he happened to catch them all.
Well, that's a great fun story of that era in the early Alabama times. And like usual, if you get a chance, please share to your family, friends, and then also check out being a patron on the website, alabamabuccaneers.com. You can click on the little button there. And then until the next episode, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
We'll let Red Foley play us out with a little Alabama Jubilee.
One-legged Joe dancing round on his toes, throws away his crutch and hollers, hey, let her go, oh, honey.